Here I come. What's up, guys? What's up, boys and girls? Super Stacy. Her name is Stefan, so you know what it is. My teacher guy. That sounds like a funny story. And I can't say that word.
My name is Karen, and this happened when I was 4.
Before we get started, y'all wanna double these? Oh yeah, I got something to drink with it too. And give y'all some root beer Fago.
13 years old. I had the best teacher ever who was also really kind. She let us do whatever we wanted and didn't care about us at all. I know that it wasn't appropriate for her students. However, because we were young kids, everyone liked her except for one person. He was what we called a nerd. He was smart, but he was a big snitch and really annoying. He always said we all needed to study and not goof around, but everyone ignored him. We heard that our teacher had been fired. There were rumors going around about her. One was that she was fired because the nerd had snitched on her and told his parents. They all complained to the principal. Soon the nerd was bullied a lot because of it, and he finally ended up leaving the school and moving to another one. When he packed his stuff and left the classroom on his last day, I saw him crying and staring at us with a bruised eye. It gave me goosebumps. About 2 years later, on a rainy day, we had to stay inside the classroom. We were just talking, playing, and doing other stuff as usual. When the class was about to start, our teacher told us all to use the bathroom beforehand. So while some of us were walking to the bathroom, we saw that the teacher who had been fired walked into the school. She was calm. As we walked past her, she suddenly looked at us, stopped us, and said, "Wait, I know you. You guys were in my class, right?" She was smiling at us, but somehow she looked very tired, and I felt a bit weird. We replied, "Yes, ma'am." At that very moment, we saw a gang of boys following her, and I could see that they were holding knives with some blood on it. We then started screaming, but all the classrooms were far away from the bathroom, so nobody could hear our desperate screams. Then we turned around and told the teacher and the gang to please go away and spare us. Our teacher glared at us for a while and slowly started smiling. "Don't worry, you are next." As soon as she told us this, someone abruptly pulled out a knife and they all started grabbing us. The next thing I knew, we were dragged onto some kind of big van. My friends and I were crying and terrified. I knew something bad was going to happen. However, at that moment, when they pulled us into a van, we suddenly heard a loud siren. Fortunately, one of the teachers saw when they entered the school and stabbed some of the students. He immediately called the police. After they were arrested, all the students had to go home early and the school closed for a week. It turned out that the gang was hired by former surgeons who were fired for removing people's organs and killing them. Furthermore, our psychopath teacher had been working with them, and she was a murderer who would have murdered parents and raped their kids. A few months after, the whole gang was sentenced to 10 years in prison. She finally received a death sentence. However, that was not all. To our surprise, the police also found out that the nerd had been helping the teacher with murder for a long time. I don't know why he did that, but anyway, he will be charged with helping her with murder when he turns 18.
Oh my God. I don't get it. Cause you snitch on your teacher, but I think I know why he was helping her. He probably was helping her because they always being getting people up and stuff. So skateboard? I want to ride.
There's a building that has a parking garage.
I mean, I got a twisty skateboard, but it's just like the wheels came off.
With a bicycle parking area on the lowest level that me and a group of my friends like to hang out at and skateboard. I called up my friends Jordan, Dorian, Jalen, and Aditya one Sunday to ask if they wanted to go skateboarding with me at the garage. They all agreed, so we met up at my house and rode our skateboards and longboards through the unkept paths between the apartment buildings and arrived at the garage. We waited for a car to drive in and set off the sensor to open the garage door. Then we tailgated in. When we got inside, we rode our boards around, just practicing some skills. Eventually, we rode down to the lower level and sat in the bicycle parking area to have a break and drink some soda.
I just thought about that. No, never going in no parking lot alone.
All of a sudden, a car pulled up and parked in a spot that was visible from the bicycle parking area. The car sat in the spot with its engine running and the driver still sitting inside. Then another van pulled up and shut off its engine in the middle of the road. Both drivers got out and met each other halfway. They were both tall and intimidating with their hoods up. One driver passed the other driver money, but then they suddenly began to argue. We all watched in awe as they flung their hands around dramatically and started to shout. We couldn't make out what they were saying since the loud echo distorted their voices. We all froze as the van driver pulled out a gun and shot the other driver in the throat. The driver collapsed, blood pooling around him. The van's driver yelled something, and then we saw two other guys get out of the van. One tossing the body into the back seat, and the other began wiping up the blood. Something was going on here, and I could tell we were in danger. Dorian whispered that we had to leave, now. We all began to quietly grab our skateboards and started hiding behind a wall. But the blood-cleaning guy spotted Jalen as he was making his way over and yelled to the driver. The van started up, and right then, Aditya screamed. We all threw down our skateboards and began pushing away as fast as possible. I could hear so many noises in my ears, like skateboards moving, voices shouting and screaming, and the roaring van behind us. Dorian was on an electric skateboard and was taking the lead as we wound around the ramps, rising to the next level. Jordan was next to me, and Aditya was close behind us on his scooter. Jalen, who had been the last to leave, was falling behind, and we could see the van speeding up behind him. I yelled for him to run to the side, and he popped his skateboard into his hands and took a sharp turn to the left, running up a fire escape. The van screeched around the corner as Dorian began approaching the garage door. And that's when I realized something. We had to wait for a car to trigger the sensor and open the door. I yelled at Dorian to take the staircase to the right, and he did. Jordan and I hopped off our skateboards and ushered Aditya into the staircase. We burst out into some dirty apartment floor, and I quickly called Jalen. He picked up and told us he was outside the apartment building by the main road. We held our skateboards and ran through the apartment floor until we found the fire escape. Then we managed to run outside and met Jalen, where we called the cops. After the cops arrived, they started to search the parking garage. They couldn't find any traces, nor the cars there, so they decided to check the security footage. The footage revealed the van's license plate was covered with duct tape, but they did catch the license plate of the car of the driver who'd been shot. They said they'd keep us updated and gave us a lift home. Since then, we've never seen the van again or gotten any important information from the cops. My friends and I have recently resorted to the much safer and public skate park nearby and never visited that garage again.
So they telling me they did knock off these people. Halloween day.
This is a story that happened to me not too long ago. It was Halloween. There was a big 2-story house in our town which was rumored to be haunted. Out of curiosity, one of my best friends, Carlos, and I decided it would be a good idea to test out this rumor. So we went to that house for trick or treat. It was about 11:45 p.m., and it took us a while to get to the house, as it was a bit far away from the other houses. When we arrived at the house, we rang the doorbell. A man who looked as if he was in his mid-30s suddenly came out. He opened the door almost right away. He had a cigarette in his hand. I could see that he was dressed in a hoodie and ripped jeans, and he looked kind of tired. My friend mentioned the rumor about his house being haunted. We laughed out loud, but he didn't reply to anything we said. He just stared at us, and then he said, "You kids are almost a little late for Halloween. It's going to end in 2 minutes." Well, he was right. It was almost 12 a.m. He then told us the candy was in his room and offered for us to come in. We sat on the living room couch waiting for the man who had gone upstairs. However, when he came back, he insisted on us going upstairs because he had Reese's chocolate, which was my favorite at the time. So, being a pretty mindless teenager, we took him up on the offer. We went upstairs following behind him and went into one of the dimly lit rooms. Right at that instant, I could see that there were a lot of different kinds of knives in the room. It looked as if the man were collecting knives. We thought it was a pretty cool hobby. The man approached us and gave us each 2 pieces of chocolate. Although he still didn't say anything, we thanked him and turned around to go downstairs. All of a sudden, Carlos screamed in pain and fell down the stairs. I turned around and saw the man was holding what appeared to be a red knife, which was probably one from his collection. With mixed emotions, my adrenaline immediately kicked in. I tried to punch the man in the face, but he turned back and then stabbed my leg. I barely managed to hold back the pain and literally knocked him out with 5 punches. The man collapsed. I took the knife out of my leg and started limping, holding Carlos in one arm. We finally escaped from that house. I could see that there was blood all over Carlos's back. With shaking hands, I called the police. As soon as they arrived, they arrested the man after he had regained consciousness. The ambulance took me and Carlos to the hospital. I wasn't hurt too bad, but Carlos was apparently stabbed twice in the back and bled out a lot. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks to recover. Sometime after I got out of the hospital, the police officer reported to my parents that the man had apparently been a registered sex offender and had raped a few children before. Luckily, he was sent to jail right after they arrested him. After all of that, I never went inside a stranger's house again. And to this day, I'm still afraid of what would have happened if I wasn't able to hold back the pain of being stabbed and had failed to escape from that man.
You got stabbed, but you'd be dead, and his friend would be dead. Cause who else gonna try to
World of Anime with the Funimation app in both subs and dubs.
that commercial? You ever seen a little
This happened not long after we moved into our house in 2003. It was a nice and big house, which was made in the 1950s. One day
It's just like, oh my God, all over the place. Hey, jeez.
was in my backyard watering the grass, and then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something that made me pause. There was a man standing next to the shrubs near our backyard's wall. He was dressed like a carpenter. His head looked like it was tilted sideways, and his body was slightly facing our fences sideways. Then he saw me and smiled kindly at me. At first, I thought he was fixing someone's house, and that it was his job. However, only after he faced me, I realized that wasn't the case. When I looked at him with narrowed eyes, I noticed that his neck was visibly broken, causing his head to awkwardly tilt to the side. I then saw that he waved at me once, but I was too shocked to scream at the time. After I regained consciousness, I looked around, but he had vanished and had literally faded away. 2 nights later, I woke up at 3 a.m. Noise was coming from my ceiling. It sounded like someone wearing construction boots was walking very slowly. I started to freak out, thinking that it might be a thief. However, I suddenly realized that that part of the roof was so thin, which meant nobody could walk on it. The steps abruptly stopped after a while, and when I felt at ease, I heard another horrible sound. I heard a sharp scream that sounded like a man, then a loud thud, as if someone had dropped on my ceiling, followed after. I covered my head with a blanket. My hands and whole body shivered, and after 10 minutes of nothing, I peeked outside. It was completely quiet. I saw and heard nothing, but I couldn't fall back asleep that night. The next morning, I started to look up the history of the house. To my surprise, it turned out that there was a report about the carpenter I met a few days before in the backyard. In 1958, he had been hired to fix the roof while the owners were on vacation. However, the carpenter had fallen abruptly through the weak spot on the roof while he was working and had broken his neck. He couldn't scream for help, and no one ever knew what happened to him as the owners were gone for 2 weeks. He was finally found when they came back, but had already died. This happened right above my bedroom. Suddenly, I felt bad for the poor guy, and I guess he's still looking after things. Since then, I've seen him sometimes, but I'm no longer afraid of him.